Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I teach history to 8th graders, and most days are pretty routine. Kids zone out, someone forgets their homework, the usual stuff. But a few weeks back, something happened that turned into the wildest situation I've dealt with in all my time teaching. The whole thing started on an afternoon. My class was discussing the Revolutionary War, and I was trying to get them interested in how Washington managed to keep his army together during that brutal winter at Valley Forge. Most kids were paying attention, scribbling notes, but one student in the third row was glued to his phone. I have a simple rule about phones in my classroom. They stay put away unless we're using them for something educational. No exceptions. This kid knew the rule. Everyone knew the rule. I'd explained it on the first day of school and reminded them plenty of times since. I walked over to his desk and held out my hand. I told him he knew the deal and needed to hand over the phone until the end of class. The kid looked up at me like I'd just asked him to donate a kidney. He refused immediately, saying there was no way he was giving me his phone. I reminded him it wasn't a request and that he knew the policy. He shot back that I couldn't just take his stuff. I kept my hand out waiting. The rest of the class had gone quiet, watching. He stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly grabbed the phone and jerked it away from me. He yanked it so hard that it flew out of his grip and sailed across the room. The phone hit the window with a loud crack. Glass shattered everywhere. The phone bounced off the window frame and clattered to the floor. Nobody moved. The kid just sat there staring at his phone, which now had a spider web of cracks across the screen. I told everyone to stay in their seats while I called the front office. The assistant principal came down, took one look at the mess, and started asking questions. The kid tried to say I grabbed the phone from him and that's why it broke. I explained exactly what happened. A few students backed me up. The assistant principal told the kid to come with him to the office. I swept up the glass during my planning period and filled out an incident report. The next morning, the kid's parents showed up at school before first period. I was setting up for the day when the assistant principal called me down to the main office. The parents were sitting there with their son, and they did not look happy. The dad started in on me immediately. He said I'd broken his son's phone and that it was an $800 device. I explained that I hadn't broken anything and that their son had grabbed it and thrown it himself. The mom insisted I'd been trying to take it from him and that I was responsible for what happened. I told them he wasn't supposed to have it out during class. When I asked for it, he yanked it away and lost his grip. I mentioned there were 30 witnesses who saw the whole thing. The dad said he didn't care what anyone else saw. Since I touched the phone, I needed to pay for it. The assistant principal tried to calm things down, but the parents kept insisting I owed them $800. They wouldn't listen to reason. Finally, the assistant principal said he'd review the security footage and get back to them. 2 days later, I got called into a meeting with the principal and the district's legal coordinator. They showed me the footage from the hallway camera, which had a partial view into my classroom through the door window. You could clearly see the kid jerking the phone away and it flying out of his hands. The district coordinator said they'd decided on a course of action. The school sent a letter to the parents. In it, they acknowledged that since the phone was damaged during a classroom incident, they would reimburse the cost of replacing it. They cut a check for $800. But that wasn't the end of the letter. The school also sent the parents a bill for $1,678. That was the cost of replacing the specialized window their son had broken. The district explained that once the phone left my possession, it was the student's responsibility. Since he threw it into the window, he was liable for the damage to school property. The parents called the school immediately. I wasn't in that meeting, but I heard about it later from the principal. Apparently, the mom was furious. She went off about how ridiculous the whole thing was and insisted the school couldn't charge them for a window. The principal explained that her son had damaged school property and the window needed to be replaced. He mentioned we had security footage and witness statements confirming what happened. The dad jumped in, saying his son was just a kid and that the whole situation was completely unfair. The principal replied that he was old enough to understand what he'd done and that the bill stood. The parents tried arguing that I provoked their son by trying to take his phone. They said he'd been defending his property. The principal shut that down pretty quickly by pointing out that phones weren't allowed out during class time and that their son had violated school policy. They threatened to sue. The district coordinator explained that the school had documented everything thoroughly, including the security footage, my incident report, and statements from multiple students. If they wanted to pursue legal action, they were welcome to try. In the end, they paid the bill. They didn't have much choice. The alternative was having the school press charges for destruction of property, which would have been worse for their son. The kid also got 5 days of in-school suspension for destroying school property and refusing to follow classroom rules. He spent those 5 days sitting in a silent room doing worksheets while the rest of us went about our normal routines. When he came back to class, he was a lot quieter. He kept his phone in his backpack and didn't pull it out once. His parents never showed up at the school again. The whole thing became legendary in the staff room. Teachers I barely knew were stopping me in the hallway to ask about it. The story spread to other schools in the district. I even had a teacher from the high school email me to say she wished her administration would back her up like that. What really struck me was how the district handled it. They could have just smoothed things over and made me pay for the phone to avoid conflict. Instead, they made it clear that students and parents can't just bully teachers into taking responsibility for things that aren't their fault. The broken window got replaced 2 weeks later. It's one of those thick, energy-efficient ones that cost a fortune. Every time I walk past it now, I think about that afternoon and how differently things could have gone if the school hadn't had my back. The kid finished out the year without any more incidents. I landed the customer service job at a small tech company through a pretty standard interview process. The woman who hired me seemed impressed with my communication skills and problem-solving abilities during the interview. She was warm and encouraging, telling me I'd be a great fit for the team. A few weeks after I started, she put in her notice and left the company. That's when everything changed. The billing rep got promoted to office manager to fill the vacancy. From day one in her new role, she had a problem with me. I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. I showed up on time every single day. My call stats were consistently at the top of the team. Customer feedback surveys came back with glowing reviews whenever I was on shift. I genuinely enjoyed helping people solve their tech problems, but none of that mattered to her. She'd hover near my desk listening to my calls. She'd pull me aside to critique the way I phrased things, even when the customer had been completely satisfied. She questioned why I took an extra 2 minutes on a bathroom break. She'd send me emails at the end of each day listing minor issues she'd noticed. Things like taking 3 minutes instead of 2 on a call when the customer needed extra help, or using a phrase she didn't approve of even though it resolved the customer's problem. It felt like she was actively searching for reasons to write me up. I finally vented about it to my husband one evening. He worked at the same company in a different department, a couple levels above where I was. His face got this uncomfortable look when I described what was happening. He told me he thought he knew what this was about. I asked him what he meant, and he explained that before we got together, back when I was still in the interview process, she had asked him out. He said he turned her down. He confirmed it was true. He told her he wasn't interested. She seemed fine about it at the time, but that was before I got hired, before we started dating. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't about my performance at all. This was personal. I started documenting everything she did, every unnecessary critique, every email that singled me out for things other team members did without consequence. I went to the owner and laid out everything that was happening. The constant nitpicking, the way she treated me differently from everyone else on the team, the hostile work environment she was creating. I showed him the documentation I'd been keeping. He looked through it briefly and set it aside. He told me he heard my concerns, but she'd been there since they opened. He said he couldn't just fire someone over a personality conflict. I told him this wasn't a personality conflict. This was affecting my ability to do my job. He said he'd keep an eye on things. That was the best he could offer right now. He did nothing. She continued her campaign against me. She started assigning me the worst shifts. the ones nobody else wanted because they had the most difficult customers. She'd schedule me for weekend coverage more often than anyone else on the team. When I asked why, she said it was based on seniority. But there were people with less time at the company who never got those shifts. Performance review time rolled around. I went into that meeting knowing my numbers were solid. I had documentation of every positive customer survey. My call resolution rate was the highest on the team. My average handle time was efficient without sacrificing quality. She slid the review across the desk. The ratings were barely average. The comments were vague and critical. She wrote that I needed to work on my communication skills, that my time management could be better, and that I wasn't a team player. None of it was backed up by actual data. Then came the pay increase. She told me I was getting a 5 cent per hour raise. I pointed out that everyone else got at least 50 cents. Some people got $1. She said this reflected my performance level. I wanted to argue, but I knew it would go nowhere. I signed the paperwork and left her office feeling completely defeated. My husband was furious when I told him. He wanted to go to the owner himself. I told him not to because it would only make things worse. 6 months dragged by. Then the company hit a major crisis. The general manager quit suddenly. 2 senior people from my husband's department left with him. They all went to work for a competitor that did the same type of business we did. Within weeks, 2 massive accounts our owner had been pursuing for months ended up signing with the other company instead. The owner was convinced someone had leaked information. He sent several people home with pay while he investigated, including the office manager. Her brother also got sent home since he worked in the same department as my husband. The whole office was tense. Nobody knew who might be accused next. People were whispering in the break room about who could have done it. Some suspected the general manager had taken confidential information with him. Others thought someone still at the company was feeding information to the competitor. 2 days later, he called a team meeting. He announced that he'd completed his investigation. There was no leak. Everyone he sent home would be returning tomorrow. We were moving forward. The accounts were lost because the competitor simply made better offers. I'd been keeping tabs on the office manager's blog for months. I'd stumbled across it by accident when searching for something else online. She used everyone's name spelled backwards and made up a fake company name, but it was obviously her writing about us. During the investigation period, she'd gone into overdrive. She posted multiple updates about being sent home, about how she thought the owner was probably messing up payroll while she was gone, about how he'd probably forget to pay taxes and get in trouble with the IRS. She wrote that he was too stupid to run a company without her there to hold his hand. She called him incompetent and worse. She wrote about how the company would probably collapse within a year. After the team meeting ended, I approached the owner. I asked if I could talk to him privately for a minute. He said sure and asked what was up. I told him I needed to show him something. I pulled up her blog on my phone and handed it to him. He started reading. His expression shifted from confused to angry to absolutely furious. He started scrolling through older posts, finding more and more. He found posts about how she thought he overpaid certain employees, posts about how she disagreed with business decisions he made, posts mocking customers and their problems. He asked if this was who he thought it was. I told him to look at the names. Look at the company name she made up. It was all backwards or slightly changed, but it was definitely her writing about us. He kept reading. Then he found a post I hadn't seen before. She'd written about how much she hated me, how she was trying to find ways to get me fired, how I didn't deserve to work there. She wrote that I only got hired because I was sleeping with someone in management. She wrote that she was going to make sure I never got promoted, that she'd drive me out eventually. He asked me to forward him the link to the blog, all of it. I told him it was already done. He spent the rest of the day in his office going through every single post. The next morning, she walked in at her usual time. I was at my desk when the owner called her into his office. The whole team went quiet. We could hear raised voices through the closed door. She came out 15 minutes later carrying a box with her personal items. Her face was red. She wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. She walked straight to her desk and started throwing things into the box. Pictures from her bulletin board, coffee mug, desk calendar, When she walked past my desk on her way out, she stopped. She looked at me and asked if I was happy now. I didn't say anything. She was gone. Her brother quit 2 days later in solidarity. The owner called me into his office that afternoon. He apologized for not taking my concerns seriously earlier. He said he should have investigated when I first came to him with documentation. He said he'd been too worried about losing long-term employees to see what was really happening. He offered me a raise effective immediately, 50 cents per hour to start making up for the unfair review. Within 3 months, a management position opened up in my department. He offered it to me. The position came with a salary of $42,000 a year. That was almost $10,000 more than what I was making. I accepted. Within a year, I had a team of 5 people reporting to me. My new role came with actual respect and recognition for my work. The owner made a point of asking for my input on department decisions. Other managers treated me like an equal. I never found out where she ended up. I bought this place about 2 years back after saving up for most of my 20s. I'd grown up in the city, cramped apartments and constant noise, so having space and quiet felt like a dream. The property came with its share of work, clearing trails, fixing up the old fence line, dealing with the occasional curious deer, but I loved it. It was mine. And after years of renting and living paycheck to paycheck, that meant everything. Most mornings I'd sit on the back porch with my coffee, watching the sun filter through the trees. It was peaceful. That morning started the same way. I was out there in my usual spot, mug in hand, when I heard something that didn't belong. Rustling, heavy footsteps, not the light, careful movement of animals, but people crashing through the underbrush. I stood up, squinting toward the tree line. 2 figures emerged from the woods, a woman and a kid, maybe 10 years old. Both were dressed in full hunting gear, camouflage jackets and pants, boots caked in mud. The woman had a rifle slung over her shoulder. My stomach dropped. This wasn't right. I set my coffee down and walked toward them, keeping my distance. My heart was already picking up speed. I called out to them, asking if I could help them with something. The woman turned, and instead of looking embarrassed or apologetic, she just looked annoyed, like I was interrupting her. I pointed out that they were on private property. Karen said she knew that already. She said it so casually, like it didn't matter at all. She explained that the hunting was good here and her son wanted to try it out. She told me not to worry because they wouldn't be long. I stared at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. She knew she was trespassing. She just didn't care. I told her that wasn't how this worked. I explained that she couldn't just come onto someone's property without permission, especially not for hunting. I said it was dangerous and illegal. Her face twisted into a scowl. She stepped forward, and my breath caught in my throat when she unslung her rifle and leveled it in my direction. She told me they weren't hurting anyone and ordered me to go back to my house and leave them alone. She added a threat at the end, saying, "or else." My hands shot up. I told her there was no need for threats. I said I was going back to my house, but I warned her that I was calling the police. I started backing away slowly, keeping my eyes on her. She didn't lower the rifle. Her son stood there beside her, looking uncomfortable but not saying anything. I turned and started walking back toward the house, looking over my shoulder every few steps. Then I heard it, a crack that split the air. She was firing. I didn't think. I just ran. My legs pumped hard, zigzagging through the trees. I didn't know if she was shooting at me or just trying to scare me, and I wasn't about to find out. Another shot rang out, then another. Bark exploded off a tree to my left. My lungs burned. I burst through the back door of my house and slammed it shut, locking it with shaking hands. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, nearly dropping it twice before I got it to my ear. The dispatcher answered, and I told them someone was shooting at me on my property. I said I needed help right away. I gave them my address, my voice cracking when I tried to explain what had happened. The dispatcher stayed on the line, telling me officers were on the way, but it felt like forever. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I went to the safe in my bedroom and pulled out my shotgun. I'd bought it years ago, mostly for peace of mind, and I'd hoped I'd never need it. But now, standing in my own home with someone outside who'd just tried to kill me, I didn't have a choice. I positioned myself where I could see the driveway and the approach to the house. My finger hovered near the trigger guard, not on it, but close. Every sound made me flinch. The wind, a branch scraping the roof, my own breathing. Then I saw her again. Karen was moving toward the house, rifle still in her hands, scanning the windows. She was hunting me, on my own property. The absurdity of it would have been funny if I wasn't terrified. I gripped the shotgun tighter, my mind racing. What if she tried to break in? What if she started shooting through the walls? Could I actually pull the trigger if it came to that? I'd never pointed a gun at another person in my life. Then the sirens came. The sound was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. 3 police cars tore down the driveway, lights flashing, tires spitting gravel. Officers jumped out with their weapons drawn, shouting commands. Karen froze, the rifle still in her hands. For a second I thought she might actually try something, but she dropped it and put her hands up. Her son stood there, wide-eyed and shaking. I opened the door slowly, still holding the shotgun, and one of the officers waved me back inside. They cuffed Karen right there in my front yard and put her in the back of a cruiser. Another officer took the boy aside, talking to him quietly. The kid looked scared out of his mind. One of the officers came to the door and took my statement. I told him everything, my voice still unsteady. He nodded, writing it all down, and told me I'd done the right thing by calling and staying inside. They found shell casings near the tree line where she'd been shooting. Evidence: Karen was charged with trespassing, illegal hunting, and attempted murder. The trial took months, and the whole time I kept replaying that morning in my head. The look on her face when she pointed the rifle at me. The sound of the shots, running for my life on my own land. In the end, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 3 years for nearly killing me because she wanted her son to have a fun morning hunting on someone else's property. Her son went to live with his father, who apparently had no idea what she'd been planning. I still live here. I still drink my coffee on the back porch. But now I keep the shotgun closer, and I don't take the quiet for granted anymore. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.